Welcome on in. WIP Daily, Joe Giglio with you. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following the podcast. Of course, our YouTube feed, which we're on right now, 94 WIP. Check it out there as we are 8 days away from the MLB trade deadline. Also, training camp this week. It's a big week around here. Eagles training camp starting on tomorrow, but Wednesday, real practice. But most of our attention, at least like paying attention, is going to be on what Dave Dombrowski's going to do over the next 8 days because the Phillies have a clear need now. Another one. I mean, we could continue to have the conversation about an outfielder, about a right-handed bat. They do need that. They do need one more bat. But as time goes on, I'm guessing they're going to probably go with more of a smaller bat or platoon bat, a role player type to fit into the outfield. And they're going to spend their time and their energy to get a relief pitcher because a couple things. One, Trey Turner's offense has added enough now with JT back that I think they probably feel like they can get by with the core of the offense they have and just supplementing. But the bullpen has suddenly turned to become the bigger issue for this team. And that's because of Jose Alvarado. I still feel really good about Jeff Hoffman. I feel good about Matt Strom. And I think Ryan Kerkering this weekend aside, he feels like he's on the right track. And I think Soto's been good, for the better part of 6 to 8 weeks. But Jose Alvarado has gone the wrong way. I mean, seriously, the wrong way. His numbers, he still gets lefties out. Righties have hit him. Strikeout numbers have been down really the whole year, and he just kind of got away with it. And you look at some of the numbers since, let's say, the London trip when they played the Mets and he blew the save on the Sunday. It's bad. I don't trust Jose Alvarado right now. And your guess is as good as mine on what Alvarado they get over the next 2 to 3 months. I mean, he could rebound, did have a decent outing yesterday, or he could completely go in the tank. And we've seen all versions of Alvarado in a Phillies uniform. So I think between now and next Tuesday, Dave Dombrowski has to go get a relief pitcher and one that you could, imagine slotting in the seventh, eighth, or ninth inning in a postseason game. Last year, I thought Dave Dombrowski, for all the good things he's done as a Phillies executive, really was way too passive last year at the deadline. They could have used another arm in the bullpen, didn't really do it. They could have used a real bat in the outfield like a Tommy Pham, didn't do it, and it bit them. This year, it's got to be all in. So I've got 5 names for you. One we've talked about in this podcast a couple months ago, and I keep talking about them, but 5 total names that I think could be targets for the Phillies, should be targets for the Phillies, and could replace Alvarado as a leverage arm in late innings. All right, I'll run through a few of them, and then we'll get Tucker's thoughts, and then give you the last couple. All right, so let's start with the biggest name and the one that is the obvious one. That's Mason Miller. I don't buy that the A's are not going to trade him. I don't buy it. If you're the A's and you don't have a stadium situation, you don't have a team, you don't have a future, this is when you cash out of this kind of asset for guys that could be on the team, multiple guys for 6 years. I mean, this is when you do it before he either gets hurt again or declines. So I think the A's would listen, but I just don't think anyone's made the right offer yet, or at least has broached the right offer. So if I'm Dave Dombrowski, I'm calling up saying, which one? Aiden Miller, Andrew Painter. I'm making them say no to that. I mean, this guy is the best relief pitcher in baseball. And I go back to 2016 when the Cubs were in a similar position to the Phillies. They were the best team, but they had some, rough areas around the edges they needed to fix. And I remember that whole summer they kept saying, well, they don't want to trade Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres is a future all-star at second base. They didn't want to trade him. And then when push came to shove and the Yankees had a Aroldis Chapman, and they were willing to sell him, they traded Gleyber Torres. I think something similar could happen here if the Phillies push for this and they say, we will give you Aiden Miller or Andrew Painter. I think the A's would relent. Mason Miller's number one. I know all the insiders are saying they're probably not going to trade him. I'm not sure obviously their information is real, but I don't buy it. If they get the right offer, I think they would trade him. If this is a tier of this list, like he's here and everyone else we talk about is here. So he's number one. Number two is a guy the Phillies have been connected to a lot, including yesterday, Bob Nightingale had it. Tanner Scott, the left-handed reliever from the Miami Marlins. He doesn't look like him. He's much smaller and just less imposing. But you look at Tanner Scott's numbers, he's got some Jose Alvarado to him. He's a guy that does not throw strikes all the time, but he has great velocity, strikes batters out. He gets a lot of swing and miss. He could be totally nasty. Tanner Scott is a free agent to be, so he's a rental. It's probably not going to cost a ton, even though he might be the most accomplished reliever other than Mason Miller out there. He's a guy that, the walks are a lot. It's like 5 per 9. He's got that Alvarado Soto thing to him. And you look at his baseball savant page, it's lots of red. I would like to see him with Caleb Cotham. I think he could do something here and effectively replace Alvarado. I mean, you kind of push Alvarado down the pecking order. Tanner Scott makes a lot of sense. If Mason Miller truly is off the board, Tanner Scott ERA in the low ones probably becomes the number one target for the Phillies. I would take him. Now, if this was a long-term thing, I'd have some worry because that command and control, it's all over the place the way a lot of relievers are. But for a run to the postseason, I would definitely take Tanner Scott, and I think he should be high on the Phillies list. The next guy is kind of an out of nowhere story, but we know this name before. Kirby Yates. Kirby Yates was at one point a star pitcher. Then he got hurt a lot. And now he's a star again, all-star for the Texas Rangers. I think Texas is in a weird spot where they might just pack it in or they might do it like a soft sell because they're not really that good this year, even though they won the World Series last year. Just lost 2 out of 3 to the Orioles this weekend. They're 6 back in the division. I think both the Astros and the Mariners are better than them. So they might start selling off some parts. Kirby Yates, 37 years old. Look at his numbers. I mean, his strikeout rate's over 12 per 9. The velocity's still there. He's recovered from all these injuries. I think he's really interesting. He's bounced around, been in Atlanta, been in Toronto, been in uh, San Diego, came up with the Yankees when he was young. Kirby Yates has seen a lot. He's been around a lot. Free agent to be, probably wouldn't cost a ton. I think he'd slot in very effectively with this group of relievers. And he's has experience in his career in different spots. Ninth inning, closer, sixth inning, seventh inning. I think he kind of fits. That's also part of this conversation is who fits. The Phillies have a way of doing things to their bullpen where some nights you're the seventh inning guy, some nights you're the ninth inning guy. I think Kirby Yates would fit. Tucker, let's attack that group here. Mason Miller at the top, if the A's actually would trade him. Tanner Scott, the closer for the Marlins, who probably is going to be the best reliever traded if Miller stays. And then Kirby Yates. And I know I probably scared you when I said older Texas Ranger because that means we might do the David Robertson thing again. But what do you think of those three guys? Mason Miller, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates as possible fill-ins for Alvarado.
Yeah, I think Mason Miller, there's a reason why everyone oohs and ahs at that name. And, I think Jack mentioned on the Hi Ho podcast the other day, when we watched him pitch in the All-Star game, was probably the first time a lot of casual baseball fans got to watch Mason Miller. Not a lot of people watching Oakland A's baseball, and for good reason. And, he's going to command a lot because he is young. He has a lot of control. If you take him on, you may try to move him back to the rotation where he started last year. But someone like Tanner Scott, I think, fits perfectly. And I think the question we kind of have to ask, because you mentioned Jose Alvarado is still getting lefties out at a pretty decent clip. If you're moving him back to sort of that lefty specialist role where he was to begin with, where Matt Strom kind of is or was, now Gregory Soto's kind of taken that spot as Strom's become more of a high leverage guy. Do we have to pigeonhole ourselves into a lefty? Because if you do, like Tanner Scott's obviously the best answer. Tanner Scott's been great against right-handers too. You mentioned his sub 2 ERA, and you look at Stuff Plus, he's like top 10 with that fastball and his slider that goes about 88, 89. I think Tanner Scott's the most logical fit as, a high leverage Jose Alvarado replacement. But after that, if you're looking strictly at lefties, it's a pretty rough group, when you kind of scroll down the list of guys who might be traded. So I think looking, at both sides, not just left-handers, is gonna be what the Phillies have to do unless they really key in on Tanner Scott.
I agree. It doesn't have to be a lefty. Yeah, 'cause I think it's a good point by Tucker. You think Alvarado, we move him down the pecking order, they need a lefty. I don't really think they have a lot of lefties. They have Soto. Strom is a lefty. I'm not worried about that. And I think Strom's going to be tasked with getting big outs anyway. I mean, Strom against Ohtani a couple weeks ago felt like a playoff moment. They just need someone they could trust, a high leverage reliever. So let me throw two more at you as possible options for the Phillies the next 8 days or so. Carlos Estevez, the closer for the Angels, he's kind of transformed his career. I followed him the last couple of years. I had him on a couple fantasy teams. He walked a ton of guys. It was like tightrope walking, to get through the ninth inning sometimes. And the only reason I kept him was he got me saves. I didn't love him as a reliever. He's transformed though. Great month of June. He's found something. And what I think is interesting about him, he's a rental, 31 years old, veteran. I actually wanted the Phillies to sign him a couple years ago when he left the Rockies. I thought getting him out of course he could be good, and he's been good for the Angels. But this year, he's cut down his walks. I mean, he doesn't walk anyway. I think he probably has among this group, maybe if we take Mason Miller out, he probably has the best strikeout to walk ratio. Now, he's not striking out a ton of guys the way maybe you want in October, but he also has walked almost no one. It'd be refreshing to see a reliever like that compared to what we have with Alvarado, sometimes Soto. These guys could be wild, and Estevez is not. He's an accomplished. He's a good reliever. I mean, he would fill in very nicely. Now he's been a closer for a little while, So that might have to be a transition for him. Can he adapt to being a seventh inning guy, a sixth inning guy in the postseason? But Carlos Estevez is on my mind. He's also a rental and a free agent to be. The last name, and this one I think could come up a few times this week, or at least maybe he and his teammates. So the Rays are in a weird spot. The Rays have a negative run differential. I believe they're 500 right now. But in the American League, 500 is different than the National League. Like the National League, these you look at the wild card standings. Phillies just played the Pirates this weekend. If you're 500, you're there in the NL wild card race. American League, it's going to be way tougher with the Yankees or Orioles, and obviously what's going on in the Central. Phillies will play the Twins this week. There's some better teams than the AL. 500 is going to be a tough road to get to the playoffs. So I think the Rays are going to sell. I think the Rays are going to take a step back, sell Randy Arozarena. I wouldn't be surprised if we do a WIP daily this week on him. Uh, Zach Eflin, our old buddy, he could get traded. They could trade a lot this week and kind of retool and get ready for the next few years at Tampa Bay. And Jason Adam is a name I'm looking at in their bullpen. He's a veteran, 32 years old, and he's consistently good. Usually relievers are up and down. Since Adam got to the Rays, I think this is his third year there. He was with the Cubs before that. His ERA is 2.23. This year it's 2.25. I mean, he's just good. He's just been a good Rays relief pitcher for a while now. They know what they're doing with pitching, and this might be the time they move on from him. They just traded Phil Maton to the Mets a few weeks ago, so it feels like that Rays sale is about to happen here. The thing that's interesting about him, only 4.9 hits per nine. I mean, he's very difficult to square up. I think he's a good pitcher, 96 percentile in whiff percentage, so he gets a lot of swing and miss. Jason Adam feels like a name that's not going to get any attention, but he could get big outs in October. Tucker, Carlos Estevez from the Angels, their closer, they're obviously a seller, and Jason Adam, who's been pretty consistently good for a long time now. Those guys won't cause a buzz, but they could both help.
Yeah, there almost becomes a second tier of guys who aren't big names, might not have the best stuff or the best resume, but they've gotten big outs for kind of bad teams. And another guy I might add to that list is Hector Neris, who's been
Mhm.
the closer for the Cubs this year.
Bring him home.
Yeah, I mean, why not? They were hot before the end of the All-Star break. I was at Wrigley on Saturday. They looked pretty dead. They lost 2 or 3 this weekend to the Arizona Diamondbacks. I think they're 4th place in the NL Central right now. He's got 13 saves. We know he's had success in the postseason. Had 3 scoreless appearances against the Phillies in the 2022 World Series. He's another one that, if you strike out on some of these top guys, he's not. I mean, he'll make a headline here because people remember him and people would, kind of be interested in having him back. I think he's another name that kind of in that next tier makes sense as someone who has simply just gotten big outs. Like I don't think there'd be a moment at any point in September or October that would be, too big for him. Were you worried about him, kind of getting blinded by the bright lights?
That's right. I like that name. Throw that into, and you look at his numbers. I mean, Hector, we all know, and we watched him pitch so much here, and he was always durable, which is an important thing for a reliever. You look at his numbers. He was pretty good in April. He was really good in May. He's been outstanding so far in July. He had a bad June, and it's kind of bumped up his ERAs like 3.7 or whatever. That June, other than that, it's probably in the twos. So Hector's interesting. There's a lot. I mean, that's the one thing. I remember when the Nationals won the World Series of 2019, their bullpen was the worst, basically the worst in baseball until the end of July. They made 2 trades, 3 trades, and boom, they won the World Series. It's the one thing where there's a lot of volume. You could find any team that's a seller probably has 1 or 2 guys like, I'll take him. So Dave DeBrusque could find someone. It's about finding the right guy. Do they prioritize the top? Do they try to get Mason Miller? Do they try to get the ace to do it? Then Tanner Scott, and then the next tiers. And can you find the guy that's about to get hot and mesh with Caleb Cotham and fit in at the right time? It's Dombrowski's job to figure this out. And really, a World Series could depend on this. I mean, the Phillies have the starting pitching. I'm not worried about that. Even with some of the hiccups they've had recently, they have the starting pitching. They have a lot of offense. Could they use another platoon bat or another outfielder? Of course, and I think they'll get that. But this is the stuff that matters in October, are these relief pitchers, especially with the way we've seen Topper manage in October, very aggressive. With Ranger, with Sanchez, it won't surprise me if in the 4th or 5th inning against the Dodgers, he comes and gets the baseball, which means they got to get 15 or 16 outs the rest of the way. And you start mapping this out, like where are those outs coming from? 3 or 4 of them are coming from one of the names maybe we just debated or talked about here on WIP Daily. It's a big week for Dave Dombrowski. I expect him to get a relief pitcher. He needs to, because Alvarado right now is just not trustworthy enough. Appreciate everyone listening, subscribing, following WIP Daily. We'll talk soon.